All right, welcome back. Observers of the ASEAN region have often said that if ASEAN wants economic integration by the end of 2015, it will have to do something about its internal development gap. The bloc's 10 member states range from less developed Myanmar, which hosts this year's ASEAN summit, to advanced city-state Singapore and emerging Indonesia. Now here with us today to further analyze this issue and give us a better understanding of how to narrow the development gap within the ASEAN region is an academician and resource speaker on the issue who has written several papers and studies about this topic. And we're honored to have with us today Professor Jose Tabada of the Institute for Strategic and Development Studies. Professor Joe, that's it, right? That's what we call you. Professor Tabada is also a retired economics professor from the University of the Philippines, National Center for Public Administration and Governance. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Professor Joe, is that how we call you, sir?
Just call me Joe.
Just call you Joe.
Call me Joe.
Okay,
yeah.
I like that.
I feel more comfortable. Just
All right.
Joe. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Joe, first give us an overview of the social and economic development gaps that ASEAN must narrow before it can achieve a full integration.
Okay. First, it is important to know that there are two groups of countries in ASEAN. We have the so-called ASEAN 6, which comprises the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, and Thailand. Some of these, 5 of these are the original members of ASEAN. And we have the CLMB group of countries. It's comprised Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. The division according to these two categories has to do mainly with income, with the ASEAN 6 belonging to the higher income groups and the CLMB belonging to the newer and lower income ASEAN member states. Okay. Just to give you an idea as to the extent of the gap that separates these two countries, if we take, for example, the most developed country in ASEAN, which is Singapore, and the least developed, which is Myanmar, in terms of per capita income.
Yes.
Singapore has a per capita income of almost $50,000 per year. That's the income of the average Singaporean. The average per capita income in Myanmar is $1,000. It's a ratio of 50 to 1. Now, is that wide? Absolutely yes. Is it wide relatively? Let's take a comparison with 2 member countries of the European Union. Of course, we know the European Union is sort of a model when it comes to regional integration. The country with the highest per capita income in Europe, in the EU, is Luxembourg, a little known country. It's a very tiny country. Many of us probably don't know where it is in the map. The lowest per capita income in the EU belongs to Romania. And the gap is Romania has an income of $15,000
Okay.
Luxembourg has a per capita income of almost $90,000. That's a difference of about 6 times, as compared to 50 times between Myanmar and Singapore. So that gives you an idea that, I mean, there is a wide gap that separates the more developed countries in ASEAN and the least developed ones. If we take, of course, the average per capita income of ASEAN 6 versus the average per capita income of the CLMB group of countries, the gap narrows a little bit because included in ASEAN 6 are big countries like Indonesia, which has a relatively low per capita income, and the Philippines. It also has a large population and not very low, but lower middle income country. So that pulls down the average per capita income of the ASEAN 6. And on the other hand, the average per capita income of CLMB is about $2,000 US dollars. So the difference is just about 2.5 times.
Okay.
Not, so, but there is that difference. Although we normally use the GDP, income per capita, as a measure of level of development, there are other indicators, of course, like level of health, poverty incidence, literacy, infant mortality rates, and other indicators that constitute what the UNDP calls the Human Development Index.
Okay.
It's a composite index made up of some of these I have suggested. But the good thing with GDP is that it correlates very closely. I mean, you take the GDP, and chances are you can never go wrong with the other indicators, and that's because with a high level of income, you can, of course, support education, you can support health and nutrition, you can support child care that reduces infant mortality. You can do a lot of the other things. That's what's good with the high incomes, is that everything is possible. Everything is possible. Or we make possible a lot of things.
Okay.
So that's the nature of and extent of the gap between among the ASEAN member countries. It's wide. But it's closing a bit.
How do we reconcile the gap, sir?
How do we close the gap?
Yes.
Well, the good thing is that, well, we'll start with the good news.
Okay.
The good news is that the CLMV group of countries are growing faster
Okay. Yes.
than the ASEAN 6 countries. The long-term rate of growth of the CLMV group of countries is almost 7%. 7%. About the growth rate of the Philippines last year. While that of ASEAN 6 is less than 5%. So if you project that into the future, sooner or later the CLMV can catch up.
Okay.
How long is, of course, the question. That's the other side. While catch up is possible, catch up at current growth rates may take an impossibly long period. Now, can we tolerate that kind of gap for a long time? By some calculations that I made on, I think, a bit optimistic assumption that the CLMV group of countries grow at 10%. I said optimistic because it's 7%. I'm better,
Yes.
Ang historical rate. And the ASEAN 6 countries grow at 5%, close to their historical average.
Okay.
It will take the CLMV group of countries will be able to attain 90% of the level of per capita income of the ASEAN 6 by year 2030.
So
That's 15 years after, supposedly, after full integration, supposed to have taken place next year.
Okay.
90% by 2030. Now, if for some reason the CLMV grows at its historical rate of 7%, and ASEAN 6 grows at 5%, the catch-up will have to take considerably longer, maybe up to year 2040, 2050. So, yes, catch-up seems possible, may take a long time.
Yes, sir. It's the good news that we are talking about here, the
Yeah.
possibility of the
Possibility
CMLV
of a catch-up, yeah.
catch up with the ASEAN 6. But in reality, sir, we have also discussed about the huge gap between the countries. And may we just know what will be the implication of this in time for the integration next year?
Well, between now and next year, there's not much you can do, really. Catch-up is a long-term process. Between now and next year, in terms of its implication, I guess they just have to, sabihin naman nila, work in progress yung ASEAN.
Yes.
Work in progress. So we are moving there, but
Yes.
next year, to expect catch-up next year is unrealistic, to say the least. Yeah, but If we live long enough, we may see a catch-up. You will.
But-
You will see a catch-up.
Okay. So,
Sir-
President Aquino, yeah, okay, go ahead.
No, no, just going back on
Yeah.
that, sir, because this huge gap, there are other things that we are talking about, like, is it possible for us to have the same currency or just one currency in ASEAN? But seeing this huge gap between the development of these countries that you have mentioned a while ago, is it really possible or we have to wait for the
Yung-
CMLV to catch up?
Yung single currency siguro medyo matagal yan. Matagal yan. Even Europe, which probably was more homogeneous to start with than ASEAN.
It took them
such
50
a long
years.
time, and
Yes.
even so, Britain is still out of the
Yes.
of the euro currency, and there are some countries now that are threatening to pull out. With the recession that they're experiencing,
Yes,
some
that's true. In
countries
some
are threatening
countries,
to
it's
pull,
pulling
to
down-
pull
pulling
out,
them down, yes.
pull out of the uniform currency area. So that's probably far off into the future if we will ever get there. I think there are certain things that we need to do before we can even think of instituting a single currency in ASEAN.
So, what does the Philippines has to do to catch up with this ASEAN integration? Or more or less,
Well, there are a few things that
be-
we are mandated to do. Of course, we are committed to reducing tariffs to zero
yeah.
in most areas. I think there are I think we should also, after the longest time, we should also get serious about enacting competition policy.
Okay.
By the way, this law has been sleeping in Congress for as long as I can remember, because in 1987 I was asked to comment on the draft of the competition law,
Okay.
and it's now 2014, and we haven't. Although I think the president is serious in having it enacted, if only because it's required. It's required. It's required to level the playing field.
Okay.
I think the other area where we have to make a change policy is
Yes.
in foreign ownership.
Yes.
Foreign
Okay.
ownership.
On the same
That will, of course, require an amendment of the Constitution, and that's what makes it a little more difficult. But those are the two things that we really need to do
Okay.
to treat foreigners, especially ASEAN member states, the same way we treat our own domestic entrepreneurs, and to prevent also to prevent the emergence of monopoly in industry after industry.
So you're saying,
Those are
sir,
the
that
two
it's-
things that we need to do. There are other things, of course.
So it's really necessary for us to change or to amend the Constitution for us to be able to catch up in this integration in terms of foreign ownership, at least.
Yes, we have to. Those are the two must policies that we have to seriously, think of enacting.
Okay. And we'll talk more about this, sir. Don't go away, because we will continue this discussion. But